Okay, we're going to explain how the parts and the vendor parts operate within the software. It's a little bit tricky. From the vendors page, we have a list of parts. Now, we can choose one of these parts, and we see we can have a photo, supplier, prices for this supplier, and then we also see that there are similar parts. So in the case of a Tapcon, that's an item that's widely available from a variety of different sources. Um, in order to make sure that your company organizes this information efficiently, uh, BidUnity allows you to associate the different suppliers of an item with the item itself. So the item is the fastener Tapcon 1/4" diameter, number 3 flathead. You'll notice that there is no length specified, and this vendor part is part number, quantity 100, I assume, 2 3/4" length. Okay, and we could create different prices for different finishes. We could also override the default value in the software with our company's own private value. And then we also see here similar parts. So that indicates that there might be different suppliers or different lengths available. In this case, we have some different lengths from the same supplier, and we have some different lengths from a different supplier. Now, it's important to make a distinction between the part that is configured in systems and the vendor part or part number that is the part that you purchase from a vendor. When we configure systems, we don't actually include the items that we buy directly in the configuration of the system, because very often we buy those items from a number of different suppliers. So I'm going to show you configuration and how this looks. So for Trulight's 3100 series system, on the jam component, the fastener 1/4" Tapcon part is used. Okay, and that corresponds to this item. There is no reference here within the configuration to where we actually buy that part. That's something that comes later. When we create a proposal, we draw up an elevation, and then we generate a parts list. That parts list is going to include the Tapcon. Okay, so we have 4 units times 2 at the jam, so there's 2 at each jam, which coincides with what we have here. Now 4 units at each jam times 2 jams. Okay, that coincides with the quantity of 4 being required in the system configuration. So we can add parts to the systems. Those parts are different from the items that we buy. Those parts are this, and the parts we buy are this. So we have a part, quantity of 4, that translates from the elevation. We have 2 jams. Each of those jams, those 2 jams, are going to require 4 of this part. Now, when we do a takeoff and we look at the pricing for the job, the software is looking at this part. Again, on the parts list, we have a quantity of 4 units times 2 plus 8 units at the mullion times 1 mullion. That's going to give us a total of 16 fasteners required. Quantity needed is 16. Now, if we look at this part, it's going to give us the whole table of suppliers the same as we have similar parts plus this part in particular. Okay, these are essentially the same things. We can switch between these things. Okay, this part, it's the same part. The supplier's part, it's a different part. So the part is configured to systems, and the part number is something that we buy. Again, the part list includes the part that is configured to the system, and we have a quantity takeoff based on that. And then when it's time to buy it, we're shopping for the part that we buy. We could switch between, equal, basically alternates. If we wanted to use a 4-inch Tapcon, that would be available. If we have another vendor that we would like to add a part or a price for, you're going to be tempted a lot of times to go back, create a new part. If you create an entirely new part, and you may do that if you're configuring an entirely new system, but if you create a new part, then that part may not be, if you create a new part, it will not be configured in any system. If you wanted to add a price or a vendor for a Tapcon, then you need to find the item, the Tapcon, that's already been included in the system so that you don't have to reconfigure it or create new configurations. You find the vendor of the item, you look up that part, and then you can add a similar part. So if you add a similar part, you have the opportunity to enter in all of the information that you need to provide there. And then in order to get that pricing reflected in your costs, what you would need to do is update the pricing. So you can keep your selections or you can select the lowest prices, but that item will then show up. So perhaps we go ahead and show an example because this is a little bit of a tricky concept. So we'll say we add a similar part. We can share it or not. We can select a vendor, so we'll go with the same one, Stanley. Okay, part number is, we'll call this the test screw. Units in package, so we buy this in a box of 100. And now we can add a price. So our price on this can be, we want to choose a not applicable. We don't really care what the color of the Tapcon is. We don't care what the finish type is, or at least we haven't supported all of the different Tapcon finish types. So per box of 100, let's say our cost is $25. Okay, we'll save that. Now this is available, it can be edited. The dollar bill sign indicates that it's a custom price for my company. And these are all of the similar items. Now if I click on any of these items, I'll find my test screw is registered as a similar part. Now if I go back to my proposal, okay, the item test screw does not show up anywhere. If I refresh the browser, it still is not going to show up. Okay, let's see, fasteners, not here. Okay, when we initially get pricing, the database is queried at that point, and if we update the pricing, now it's going to look for those new parts that may have been added. So if we get in here, we should find our test screw. Here's our test screw, most expensive screws that we can have. Okay, and there's our correct information that we just added.